All group today, so we can go ahead and have this be a little bit interactive. I want to encourage you to type questions in the chat. Heather and I are going to kind of tag team a little bit, so if we see your questions, hopefully we can address them throughout the presentation today. And I'll definitely stop partway through before I hand it over to Heather to pause for any questions. So be thinking about any input you might want to share as we go along. I'm going to start this PowerPoint presentation now. If you have any trouble seeing it, just let me know. So we're here to talk about the next Farm Bill. It may seem early because it's only 2022 to be talking about the 2023 Farm Bill, but there's a lot that's already started. It's a long process. This is a bill that is enacted, developed once every 5 years or so. Sometimes it takes a little longer than 5 years for it to get through. But because it is such a large piece of legislation, there's quite a process to get to the finish line, and that process has started. And we'll go over some of the timeline for the Farm Bill in just a little bit. But before I get started, let me just talk a little bit about OFA. As Amanda mentioned, we are with the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association, or OFA. OFA has been around for over 40 years. We've been advancing sustainable and organic policy since that time, and have had a dedicated policy program for about 10 years now. We work both at the state and federal level on policy. We also have programming for beginning farmers. We have sustainable ag education services, and we're also one of the largest USDA accredited organic certification agencies in the country. We certify organic farms in approximately 12 states across the Midwest. But this afternoon, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the problems in the food and ag system and solutions that can be addressed through the Farm Bill. We're going to ask a few questions to determine what you would like to see in this upcoming legislation and review the process to get to that final bill, along with how we can have input all along the way. Then I'm going to pass things on to our policy organizer, Heather Dean, who's going to talk about a specific bill that addresses the interface of ag and climate, as that bill is not only crucial to building a more responsible and resilient food system, but we're also hoping that tenets of that bill are going to be integrated into the 2023 Farm Bill. You all are here because you care about these issues, whether this relates to your job, your volunteer work, or your passion about healthy food access, healthy food period, or sustainable agriculture. You have a lot to offer this process as we move forward. So we want to know about your work, your vision for the future of our food system, and we're going to make some time for that discussion, as well as how you can plug in over the next 18 months or so to bring that vision closer to reality. So this is just a little pie chart that is good to ground ourselves.
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think that we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Is everyone having trouble seeing that too? I'm sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Can you see everything now?
We can see it now, Emily.
Thank you. So yeah, we're going to move right into this first pie chart, and this is really important for grounding us in the spending for Farm Bill. This is spending in billions, and you can see that the blue part of this pie chart is nutrition spending, food and nutrition. Traditionally what's been known as food stamps, but other types of programs as well. And those nutrition programs represent more than 75% of all Farm Bill funding. The farm portion of the spending is about 3% of all of that funding. So in thinking about what is the farm portion of the Farm Bill, there's three really big areas: commodity payments, crop insurance subsidies, and conservation. The Farm Bill also includes mandatory funding for programs dealing with trade promotion, ag research. And ag research is especially important as we're dealing with changes in our climate and needing to ensure that we have regionally adaptable seeds and breeds and more resilience in our food system. Renewable energy, specialty crops, local and regional food systems, organic, beginning and socially disadvantaged farmer programs, and animal disease prevention. All those things that I just talked about are represented by the everything else 3% slice in the chart that you see in front of you. It's good for us in Ohio to also acknowledge the role that Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown has played in the past few farm bills. He's consistently been a champion for local and regional food systems investment and was one of the key leads in securing ongoing and permanent Farm Bill investments in 2018. I need to take a minute here and talk about what that really means and how important it is. There's something called baseline funding. And what that is, if you have a program that gets to a certain level of funding, $50 million a year, it becomes a permanent part of the Farm Bill. And that's really important from an advocate's perspective, because if it's a permanent part of the Farm Bill going forward, that means you don't have to spend all of your time fighting just to make sure that that program makes it into the Farm Bill. So these three items that you see on your screen today, local and regional food systems, organic agriculture, and beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers, all receive that permanent baseline funding in the 2023 or 2018 Farm Bill. So it means they will be in this and all Farm Bills going forward. That gives us time to assess what's working well, what isn't working, where do we need more funding, so we can put our energy into some of those efforts as well. It's also important to mention that, Sherrod Brown is still a key lead on local and regional food systems. He has already started in thinking about a marker bill for local and regional food systems for the next Farm Bill. And again, just to demystify some of the lingo a little bit, when you hear people use the term marker bill, all that means is there are a lot of bills that are floated before the Farm Bill's put together, and they want to kind of test the waters to see how much support they can get for the things they want to see in the Farm Bill. That's why they call it setting a mark. How many co-sponsors can they get? Are there constituents in favor of this? So marker bills are a really important part of working our way up to the final Farm Bill. So as we think about local and regional food systems, I know it's something that folks on this call care deeply about. If you've used some of these programs, the farmers market, the local food promotion program, the regional food systems partnership program, or the value added producer grant program, for example, if you have feedback on those programs, what went well? What didn't go well? Are there things that aren't addressed in these LAMP? They're called LAMP programs, local ag market programs. What's not there that needs to be there to take local and regional food systems to the next level? So, think about those questions. Feel free to type questions or input into the chat, or, don't hesitate to reach out to Heather or I sometime in the future. With regards organic agriculture, Ohio continues to be in the top 10 for organic farms, but also for beginning farmers. We can really be proud of these responsible next-gen farmers that are the future of our food system. And we need to ensure that we're doing everything we can to support them. That includes programming and assistance through the Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement and the 2501 program that specifically works with underserved and BIPOC farmers. And in the last Farm Bill, those programs specifically for BIPOC and underserved communities were combined with the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program for this new program called Farming Opportunity Training and Outreach Program. So those are really important programs as we think about making sure farmers have the business planning they need, the knowledge of USDA programming that's available to them, that they have the resources and support they need to be successful. And that also includes looking at things like land access, because as most of us know, for beginning farmers, land access still remains their #1 challenge. And I do want to mention that OFA was able to garner a little bit of this funding to hire an outreach specialist, August Taylor, who's working specifically to connect BIPOC and underserved communities to USDA programming. So we only have to listen to the daily news to learn about some of the connections between the industrial agriculture system and a lot of the problems that we face in our food system. More than 40% of insect species are declining, and 1/3 are endangered. The rate of extinction is 8 times faster than that of mammals, birds, and reptiles. The total mass of insects is falling by about 2.5% a year, suggesting they could vanish within a century. Many of these are critical pollinators for our food system or important parts of the food chain for numerous species. Some of the environmental, economic, and social challenges we face are on the slide that you see right now. And as I'm sure you're aware, during the COVID pandemic, the high concentration of meat processors meant that grocery store shelves went empty and meat processing workers became sick and died due to the fact that we only had 4 meat processing companies responsible for more than 80% of all meat processing in the United States. Those meat processing workers had very difficult working conditions that caused them to become ill, and many of them died. Industrial agriculture deployed for decades on the landscape has left our soils depleted of the carbon stocks they once held. And in Ohio, we've had water quality challenges that continue to persist. And while those challenges still persist, we continue to permit concentrated animal feeding operations. The good news is that we can reverse some of these trends to create health and wealth in our local communities, rebuild our carbon stocks, and create a more just and resilient food supply chain. And where do those solutions start? They start with us, with the people who care about our food system, with the farmers, the gardeners, the food system workers, and people who understand and care about these issues and understand how critical it is that we have a well-functioning food system. We keep hoping that with what we learned with the incredible disruptions with the COVID-19 pandemic, we can learn some lessons from that and think about how to make our food system more resilient, and that will likely involve supporting more local and regional food systems. So some of the solutions on this slide are pretty clear. We need to first stop the bad, make sure we're not subsidizing things that aren't sustainable, breaking up monopolistic agribusinesses, thinking about how can we do more strategic targeted investments in local and regional food system, and do so in a way that promotes diversity in scale and scope, so that we have producers who are looking at ground cover, who are looking at crop rotations, who are looking at and thinking about beneficial insects and biodiversity in their farming systems. But also, and this is really important, along with that, we need to improve transparency and accessibility. We have a long history of inequity in the kind of programming that USDA has offered, which has disenfranchised BIPOC communities from their land and from a lot of agricultural programming. So we have a little bit of a way to go, but we've had many good things happening in this current administration, and I think a lot more we can do going forward. So we have a quick poll that Amanda is going to run. And now, Amanda, do I need to stop my screen so you can run this poll?
No, I think everyone should see it once I launch it. All right, so I launched
Okay.
the poll and see if we get any responses.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. So what we want you to do is look at these choices that you have. There's a lot of issues here that people care about. I'd like you all to think about the top 2 issues that are most important to you. Reversing consolidation and concentration, putting more investment into local and regional food systems, farm conservation, organic and sustainable agriculture support, land access and support for beginning and BIPOC farmers, nutrition incentive programming, and improving climate resilience. So those are all really important issues, but it's really hard to do everything all at once. So it's really helpful for us to know what you all think is most important. How are we doing on the responses, Amanda?
We've got 12 out of 17, so there's 3 speakers, so we should get at least 15 if everyone did it. 13 out of 17, we're pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And then I'm going to share the results. Can you see the results, Emily?
I can.
Okay.
Can you all see those? Can everybody see them?
They should be able to.
Okay, great. So for the folks on the call, it looks like the top issue is increased investment in local and regional food systems, followed by nutrition incentive and programming and climate resilience. So think about that. Think about questions or input you might have about some of those priorities, and don't hesitate to pop those into the chat. Okay. So this is the last slide that I'm going to go over because I want you to all see this process. This is kind of like what the Farm Bill process looks like. Agricultural committees, it starts in both the House and the Senate. They each do separate work on the Farm Bill. And there's even a step that goes a little bit beyond that, they're already starting Farm Bill hearings. So the Senate and the House will often invite people in from legislators' districts. If you have an issue that you think is really pertinent, there may be an opportunity to communicate, and it's good to mention the 3 legislators in Ohio that serve on Farm Bill Ag committees. Senator Sherrod Brown, as I mentioned, is on the Ag Committee. He's been a really important ally in a lot of our local and regional food systems work. But Troy Balderson is also on the House Ag Committee. He's a kind of a junior representative on that committee, and a kind of a freshman representative from Ohio on the House Ag Committee is Chantel Brown in the Cleveland area. So I'm not sure, what districts you all are in, but certainly Sherrod Brown represents all Ohioans. So they will be having these hearings to hear on specific topics, and they will frequently have Farm Bill listening sessions around the country to hear from farmers on issues that they feel is important to them. They'll draft those, what I call marker bills, to set the mark, to identify issues of importance, to see how much support there is. After those committees vote for their bill, they go out to the full floor of either the House or the Senate. There's some debate, there's amendments, there's a vote, things go to a conference committee, and then go back to the floor for final passage, after which the White House needs to sign the bill. So that's just a really quick overview of what the process looks like. The good thing is that we're a ways out from this process. Even though it started, there's a lot of opportunities to have input and feedback. And it's really my pleasure now to turn it over to Heather, who's going to talk about one of those specific areas right now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be taking just a little bit deeper dive into what is called the Agriculture Resilience Act. And Emily mentioned before about marker bills. And again, a marker bill is a piece of legislation that is put out in advance of the Farm Bill as a way to make sure that there are specific topics or that are become part of the discussion for the Farm Bill, things that we want to emphasize for the Farm Bill. And I think that this year the Farm Bill is very exciting because there's an opportunity for a lot of synergy around the issue of the climate crisis, and that by advocating for policies that promote agriculture as a solution for the climate crisis, we're also advancing our agenda for strong local food systems, for soil health, and for greater equity in USDA programming. So all of those things are related and are related to the climate crisis and to each other. And so there is really that good synergy there, which is a strong place for our work to start this year. Emily, you could go ahead and advance the slides. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are contained in the ARA in this marker bill. And one of the big pieces of it is for research, and it's specifically for research about improving the resilience of our food systems in the face of climate change. It's about risk adaptation. It's about research in agroecology and agroforestry, which are also important climate solutions. And also specifically, it's about research, public research into breeds and cultivars that would be more resilient in the face of climate change. And that's really important, that there be public breeds and seeds that are not specifically owned or controlled by a corporation. So all of those things are part of the ARA and things that we would want to be advocating for. And for example, you can see on the slide here that there's research that's being done on perennial wheat, which is something that would help to hold carbon in the soil with the deep root system, would also help to protect against erosion and generally be beneficial for the climate. Okay, Emily, go ahead for the next one. Okay, Another big one, which I know that a lot of people here in Ohio have been working on, is the connection between soil health and our food systems and the climate crisis. And again, in the ARA, there are several pieces of it that would be promoting, for example, state soil health programs. I know that we are doing work here in Ohio to try to get a state level soil health program going. There is also within the EQIP and the CSP programs, they're looking to advocate for programs that would specifically contribute to building soil health, and also that would specifically support beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers. Go ahead. And another piece of the ARA has to do with farmland preservation and farm viability. And again, this was some of the programs that Emily was mentioning earlier. For example, the local agriculture market program, support for organic farmers through an organic cost share program, farmland protection, and then also agricultural conservation easement programs. And again, all of those things are things that are useful to helping to resolve the climate crisis by promoting the local food systems and the protection of farmland. Go ahead. Another big thing has to do with pasture raised livestock. And again, this is something that Emily mentioned earlier, for example, about the small scale meat processing, and about conserving grazing lands, and also looking at alternative methods of manure management, which could, with alternative methods of manure management that could happen at a smaller scale directly on farm and be something that directly improves the soil on the farms. Another big piece of it is on-farm renewable energy through the Rural Energy for America program, also through research on dual use energy systems, and again, specifically providing consideration for beginning farmers or for BIPOC farmers or for others who have historically been excluded from these kinds of programs. And finally, this is a topic that is of great interest to me, having to do with food loss and food waste, because food waste is actually a pretty sizable contributor to carbon emissions, especially when the food waste is not composted properly. And so a big piece of the ARA would be promoting composting as a conservation practice, amendments to the Food Donation Act to try to make sure that food can, that leftover food can be donated rather than being wasted. Also, programs that would help to reduce food waste in the schools. And so all of those things together, again, help to create powerful local food systems and our potentially climate solutions as well. So the ARA is a very powerful piece of legislation because it lays out so many different important topics that we want to see in the Farm Bill. It is in the stage right now where we are gathering co-sponsors for it. We here in Ohio, we would specifically be looking to ask the members of the agriculture committees to come on as co-sponsors for the ARA. That would be Chantel Brown and Troy Balderson on the House side, and then also Sherrod Brown on the Senate side to come out and to show their support for these kinds of solutions. Okay, so now I'm going to just shift a little bit. I've been talking a little bit about the ARA, about the different policy pieces. And I would like to shift a little bit now to start to think about what it is that we can do to influence the change that we want to see. And one of the things that we at OFA really firmly believe is that the stories of our members and of other people who are doing this work in their communities are essential to achieving the change that we want. That we want to be able to shift the dominant narrative about our food systems to about what is possible within our food systems. And that the stories of the things that we and that you as people who've worked in local food systems as farmers or as community gardeners or as community food systems people, the things that you are already doing are so important. You're already doing this, you're already creating these things, and your stories can help to inspire others and can help to create policies that support your work for just and sustainable food systems. And, one of the things that happens a lot, I think, with policy work is that it can seem complicated. It can seem hard to figure out how we can make a difference. And it's kind of tempting to think, oh, well, this is just something that we're going to leave up to the experts. But the reality is that everyone who's here on this call is already an expert on this, because expert comes from experience. And so your experiences have a bearing on policy and decision making. And go ahead and advance the slide, Emily. So what I would like to do now is to take just a few moments to hear from those of you who are participating today, to hear about your vision about like what it is, how you would like for the food and farm system to be. What are you already doing? What do you love about what you do? What motivates you? What kinds of things of changes are you already achieving in the world? And what more would you like to do if you had the resources to do so? What are the barriers that you face? And what kinds of policies do you think would best support your work? And so I would like to open it up. We have opened it up so that if you wish to speak up, that you can unmute yourself and speak, or if you prefer, you could also post in the chat to respond to some of these questions. Let us know who you are, what you're doing, and what you think would be most useful from a policy perspective.
And just to reiterate what Heather said, everybody has been given permission to speak. So you can unmute yourself if you'd like to directly engage.
Mm-hmm. Or again, if you prefer not to, please also feel free to post in the chat.
This is Noreen from Local Matters. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. One of the things that strikes me when I think about what more would you like to do if you had the resources, one thing I would like to do relative to equity is to see if there's a way to better incorporate the ideas and needs of those who are most affected by the Farm Bill. And in our world of nutrition food education, food access, finding ways to reach out to the people who are most affected by these policies. And similarly with farmers, how do we get a better hearing system? And if the hearing system that's there now doesn't exist, what resources could we bring to bear to do some kind of alternative way to get information to the legislators and those who are involved in shaping the next farm bill? That's just what came to me right now.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you, Noreen. I think that that's a really important point because we want to make sure that as many people as possible have a voice in this process. And we at OFA, we in March, we had 4 listening sessions throughout the state to try to get people to come to the table and to talk about these issues. And in May, we are also planning to have an additional listening session that's specifically going to be focused for BIPOC farmers and food activists. And so those are a couple of the opportunities where people can be engaging in that process. And then in August, during the congressional recess, we will be having tours that will be focused specifically on the Ohio members of the Ag Committee, and we would very much like to have a broad participation of people at those tours who could tell their stories. And so I would very much love to hear from anyone here on this call about what voices or what people would we like to see involved in at that table. Mhm. Emily, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you did a good job addressing that question, Heather. I think too, Noreen, yourself, other people who work at Local Matters who've been really bent in community with a lot of people who were negatively affected by the food system. I'm sure that you have, you probably have some feedback just based on your experience over all these years and your interactions with these communities about what they need. And I would also say that, part of the reason I mentioned OFA having August Taylor on staff is because, sometimes it's helpful to have, someone from these communities be doing the outreach and engagement, because they're, people are more comfortable sometimes with people who understand their experience, who know their lived experience. So, empowering leaders of color, for example, to lead some of these discussions. And I know that's something that Heather's going to be doing with this BIPOC focused listening session in May, is that, it will be run by people, from those communities so that they can best facilitate and understand what's happening.
Great. Does anyone else want to weigh in on some of these questions about what things motivate you? What are you already doing? What more would you like to be doing? How can policy work support you?
And I'm going to just throw another one out there, and that's, I'd love to hear like a story of success. Does anybody on the call, could you relate, maybe through the work you've done, a story of success of how you were able to already make some positive change through one of these programs, or perhaps through a different venue?
Mhm. Well, if maybe people feel that they need a little bit more time to think about some of these questions, and I would very much, like to continue to hear from you. So if you can't immediately think of something today that you would like to say, I would be very glad to be in touch with you, set up some time to talk personally, just to hear more about what you're doing and how our policy work could specifically support you. Mhm. Emily, do you want to maybe go ahead and move to the next slide? Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now. We talked a little bit about the power of our stories and about how our experiences are so vital to this policy process. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we can be doing. One of them, so in addition to developing our stories, we need to be organizing, because our members of Congress need to be hearing from many people, many voices. And this could be through one-on-one conversations that people are having. And it could also be about educational and base building events. Just to bring these issues to the forefront and to speak up about what's important within the Farm Bill and why. And in terms of speaking up, there are a couple of key things that we're going to be doing over the next few months. One of them is asking our members to write letters to the editor about specific topics. For example, just recently, I've been working with one of our members who's writing a letter about the ARA, which is hopefully going to be published this week in the Dispatch. But just making these things visible, because if we don't make these things visible, no one's going to know about them or to understand their importance. So writing letters to the editor, writing op-ed pieces. We also are going to be scheduling in-district meetings with members of Congress. And in some cases, some of our members may have the opportunity to provide congressional testimony at some of these hearings that we've been talking about, again, to specifically relate their experiences to the policy work. So those are some of the different things that are going to be coming up over the next few months. And I, again, would very much welcome contact with any of you who think that you might be interested in doing some of these things, developing a specific topic or developing a specific idea that we could push for and that we could speak up about. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to just stop for a minute before we close out, just to see if folks have any other questions about the last changes in the last Farm Bill, about things that might be on tap for this next Farm Bill. Any questions or thoughts that you have, suggestions? Well, we're not hearing from anybody, so I'll take that to mean you don't have anything right now. But I want you to know, as Heather said, OFA is here to help in whatever way we can. I know that most of the folks on the call today, are interested in nutrition policy. We have a lot of folks who are involved in the Ohio Food Policy Network for whom nutrition policy is a key priority. I think there are opportunities to maybe network with other food policy members who care about this issue. who have specific recommendations for how we can improve food assistance to those in need, how we can provide more support to communities that are trying to, create jobs and better health in their communities by supporting local and regional food systems. So, there are ways to make this happen. And one of the parting thoughts that I'll share is that, sometimes people feel that it's either too much work or it won't make a difference. And it does and has made a difference. The fact that these 3 programs that we care so much about, underserved communities, beginning farmers, organic agriculture, and local regional food systems, just in the last Farm Bill, were made a permanent part of all Farm Bills going forward is huge. And that's one example of the success we've had. I mentioned the issue of land access earlier. It's not a Farm Bill issue per se. I mean, it is, but we've worked on it at a state level and recently passed a bill to give some more tools in the toolbox for beginning farmers to be able to access land and resources. So we have some wins under the belt. We can make change. And, we have some advocates we've worked with who are now part of the current administration in Washington, D.C. And I'll tell you that they have said that they look around and they can see the fingerprints of advocacy work everywhere. They can see things that are instituted in programs and in policies that are a direct response to a lot of the advocacy and coalition work that's been happening for years. So it may not always happen as quickly as we want it to, but we are making change and we're moving in the right direction. And for us to keep this momentum and really accelerate it in a way we really need to, as we deal with the climate crisis going forward, it's going to take a lot of us doing things, small or large, to make the kind of change we want to see. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Heather or myself to learn more about how we can help realize some of these positive wins in the future. I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda, unless anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I know you can see on the screen Amelie and Heather's contact information. I'm also going to post again the link to our listserv in the chat. So the recording for this video will go out through the listserv, but also I'm sure there'll be some additional resources related to the Farm Bureau or for the Farm Bill, that will go out through the listserv. So to continue that conversation. But I'd like to just say thank you to Amelie and Heather for taking time out of your day to spend an hour with us and kind of walk us through some pieces and parts of the Farm Bill. I know the Farm Bill is very complex, and I feel with each Farm Bill season, I'm learning something new. So thank you again, and everybody have a good day, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.